You clicked on this video because you want to learn how to write faster. So I'm going to just tell you right off the bat how to do it. You need to have a deadline, you need to have accountability, and you need to eliminate distractions. But I want to put that all into context with a story. Back when I was in college, at the beginning of my junior year, I found out about this program called the LAFSC. It was the Los Angeles Film Study Center. So I'm a junior at Lee University in Tennessee, about that far from Chattanooga. And like I said, I wanted to be a cinematographer at the time. And the idea of going off to Los Angeles, specifically Burbank, right next to Hollywood, that put stars in my eyes. I was like, oh, I want to go there. And I applied and I barely got in. That's a story for another time. But I take off to California. I packed up my car and took off to California. I drove across the country. I'd never been to California before. I got there, I was excited. The program was great. I could tell this was going to be an incredible semester. They listed out the courses that we could choose from, each taught by working professionals. And I choose some of the obvious ones, like there was a course where you were going to be shooting on film. And as somebody that wanted to be a cinematographer, that was an easy pick for me. There was also a course on screenwriting. And at the time, when I thought about screenwriting, I pictured somebody hunched over a keyboard, writing day after day by themselves. And that just did not appeal to me because I pictured myself on set, working with the best actors and actresses, working with the best directors, and spending my day on set, surrounded by people, not alone in front of a keyboard. But I decided to take the screenwriting course anyway. There's like a little voice in me said, take that screenwriting course. So I did. The very first day of that class, the teacher, a working screenwriter, said, if you write a first draft by the end of the semester, I will guarantee you an A-. And my ears perked up because I was on an academic scholarship through my 4 years of college. And to keep that academic scholarship, I had to keep my GPA above a certain level. And if I dropped below that level, then from there on out, I had to pay my tuition. So when he said, if you write a script by the end of the semester, I'll give you an A-, I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. But he also told us that most of the students that took his class did not accomplish that. Even if they set out to do it, they didn't accomplish it. Now, that ties into deadlines. I had a deadline of I've got to get this script done by the end of the semester. I'll get back to that. So the semester goes on. I'm really invested in the class, like shooting on film and directing and stuff like that. Making short films, having fun with the other classmates. And I'm doing well in my classes. I'm doing pretty well in the screenwriting class. I'm learning about the basics of telling a story, 3-act structure, how to write good characters, how to even come up with a good idea. And I'm working on that idea, and then I start working on an outline, and I start working on my characters, and then it's time to start working on page 1. And I'm lost. I'm not really lost, I'm just distracted by the other classes I'm taking. I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm putting off working on page 1, and I'm putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. That goal of writing my first script during this semester is looking more and more unlikely, and I needed to write that script to get that guaranteed A-. I was in trouble. So, spring break is coming around, and students are talking about what they're gonna do. Groups are headed off to the coast of California or headed off to Las Vegas, Nevada to lose even more money. Me, I didn't have the money to go on spring break because I'd spent a little more extra to go to this program in LA. And I wasn't the only one though that was in this situation. One of my roommates, I had 3 roommates, and one of my roommates, Ryan, he was in the same screenwriting class, and he really wanted to write a script as well. And so we made a deal, since we were both going to be stuck in our apartment for the week of spring break, that we would figure out how to write an entire script. Each of us would write our entire script over the course of spring break. And we didn't realize at the time how hard that would be, but ignorance was bliss. Ignorance was bliss. Neither one of us had ever written a script before, so we didn't know how ambitious that was. So day one rolls around, and I'm sitting at this wooden desk we have in the apartment, and a very brutal wooden chair that would make your legs go numb after about a half hour of sitting in it. And my roommate Ryan was sitting on the couch, this kind of rough burlap couch that had broken springs and would swallow you alive and make your back sore. And I'm not digging on the LAFSC. That was just the accommodations of this apartment. So yeah, we settle in to work on our scripts and motivate each other. And so as time went by on that first day, we'd shout across the room. Actually, not even shout. It was not a very big room. But we'd say across the room, how many pages you got so far? And in the beginning, it was like, well, I got 1 page, or I got 2 pages. And then it kind of became somewhat of a competition of who could write their script the fastest. And that helped to get things done, but we still weren't moving very fast. And about every 30 minutes or so, we'd switch places. One would go to the desk and one would go to the couch, just to get the blood flowing, the back feeling better, and the legs not numb anymore. So over time, over the course of that week, we're getting faster and faster. We're getting more into the groove of writing. And we didn't have any distractions because we didn't have a television, Netflix didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist, we didn't have Wi-Fi, so I mean, the idea of having Wi-Fi was not a thing back then. So yeah, there was no distractions. It was just us in that apartment. So we were eating, sleeping, and writing, and that was it. That was it. That was all. That was my spring break. That was Ryan's spring break. And by the end of that week, each of us finished our rough draft. We were ahead of the rest of the class. We went from not having a single page. We were at page 0, and by the end of the week, we had written a first draft. I think mine was about 100 pages. His was probably in the same ballpark. But man, what a sense of accomplishment that was. So I turned mine in early. I thought I was gonna be late, but I turned mine in early. And my teacher, a working screenwriter, is excited to get it. And as part of finishing a script, he said that he would make notes on it, and we'd have a one-on-one session where he would review our script. And I was excited about that. I got a real working professional that's gonna review my script. And I was also pretty nervous because I didn't know if my script was good or bad or terrible. But we sat down to review it, and he said, Ben, this script is great. You should really consider being a screenwriter. He let me know I got an A+. He went through his notes on the script. Some of them were great notes, really encouraging, and some of them were feedback on how I could make the script better. So overall, a very good meeting. And like I said, he said, you should really consider becoming a screenwriter. And he asked about, what my process was on actually finishing a script during the semester. And I told him about the spring break where I wrote the script in 1 week. And his eyes got huge because he was like, 1 week? That's really impressive for somebody who's never written a script before. He was sincerely impressed. And I was like, well, I at the time, I didn't know how long it took to write a script. And yeah, his being impressed and telling me you should really consider being a screenwriter, that got me excited. But to wrap that back to how I learned how to write fast, which I've been thinking about here lately, and that took me back to writing that first script. I realized I got all the lessons on how to write fast the very first time I wrote a script. It was have a deadline. The teacher had given me a deadline of write this script by the end of the semester. And that was a deadline that I was motivated to get to. Accountability. When I wrote the script over the course of spring break, Ryan kept me accountable, I kept him accountable. We made it a fun competition. It wasn't like he was dogging on me to, oh, you need to get your script done, Ben. It was fun. It was a competition, like I said. We turned what could have been a very boring spring break of sitting there stuck in our apartment with nothing to do into a fun, competitive week where we accomplished something important to us. And then the last one, distractions. We didn't have any distractions there at the apartment. Nothing. Zero. It wasn't intentional. It was just because we didn't have any. I didn't have an iPhone or anything like that. I think this is before the iPhone was even invented. Now I have a little gray hair, so maybe it's obvious that I'm old enough to recall that time. But yeah, hopefully this story demonstrates how you can write faster. And it reminded me how I can write faster. If I have a deadline that somebody is holding me to, and that ties into accountability, if somebody is asking me, hey, what kind of progress are you making? What's going on with the script? And if that person is truly holding me accountable, but also making it fun, so it's not like they're talking down to me like, ooh, have you gotten page 10 done yet? No, if I'm making it fun and they're making it fun, then that accountability can be an exciting thing, not a drudgery. There's my $5 word for the day. And then distractions. The world we live in now these days is full of distractions. I know by saying that I sound even older, but it's easy to set aside those distractions if you put yourself in a place where it's distraction free. If you set the cell phone in another room, if you set up your computer so you can't access the internet, then the distractions fade off into the background. Yeah, just remember deadline, accountability, get rid of those distractions. DAD, dad. I'm a dad, so that's easy to remember. Distractions, accountability, deadline. Flipped it over in reverse there. But yeah, try it out. I think it'll cut down on the amount of time it takes you to write a draft, a first draft, a second draft, a third draft. Hopefully you want to eventually get to that final draft. I think this will help you a lot. I know it will. I know it helped on my first script. I'm glad I went back to it because now I can write even faster by following this advice that I learned by accident or maybe by divine intervention years ago. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video.